A quick recap of your headlines on News at Prime tonight. The EFF intends appealing yet another damning judgment against Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. Her remedial actions against Minister Pravin Gordhan have now been set aside. In the Port Elizabeth court tomorrow, the rape trial against controversial Nigerian pastor Timothy Omotosho is expected to get underway. That's taking place in the High Court. And in Cape Town, mortuaries are struggling with storage space as unidentified bodies continue to pile up in the province. And in your sport, sad news, 5 years after the death of his son, Senzo Meyiwa, Sam Meyiwa dies after years of false promises of finding his son's killers. You're live on News at Prime. We continue our conversation then with Public Works Minister Patricia de Lille. Minister, you're giving us the nitty-gritty then of where your cleanup, as it were, of these public works departments, of these government entities begins. And you've identified the court as being top priority. Tell us more about what you're going to be doing there.
Well, you know what? I received calls from, for instance, a court in Pinetown, where they're complaining about maintenance and repair and the state of the court. And people working in the court threatened to strike the next morning. Then I had to dispatch my regional staff to go there and to look into the plan. You've got Durban Court, the number of courts. Some courts, the lifts are not working, the air conditioning are not working. And so I want us as civil servants to understand what is the impact on the judicial system by failure to maintain and repair the buildings. And that's what we're bringing in Chief Justice Mohlahlana tomorrow to just talk to all of us about the impact of that. But many courts across the country are in a bad state. And it's not fair on people who want fair justice to be dispensed to receive it in conditions like that.
So where will you begin? Is this a case where, you know, in a year's time, we'll have all the elevators at different courts in the country working? I mean, what are the expectations that we as citizens should have? Because we've seen the dire state of the court, of the courtrooms and the courthouses. But what does this intervention mean practically that people can be able to hold you to account?
Practically what it means is that instead of going for requests for proposals for every single repair, we are now putting in place term tenders, meaning that tender will be valid for 3 years, and we will make sure that the skills are in there to go and repair immediately and not wait for all the time for a tender to be awarded. That is the first step. But we also brought in consequence management. There will be consequences for people who fail to follow up on these requests for repairs and maintenance. We're also going to do inspections in all the provinces on a monthly basis and not wait for a complaint to come to us. So that plan will be put together tomorrow with the Department of Justice and Correctional Services. And then I will have to make sure that that plan is carried out, and we will give monthly updates about improvements.
And certainly, you know, at least what I've experienced is that the further away from urban areas you go, the more dire the state of affairs at these courthouses. So are you saying that even there will be a visible change, because it's something that's easy to judge?
Yes, we have got 11 regional offices across the country and every province. Some provinces we've got 2, like here in Gauteng. And it will be the responsibility of the regional officials to travel to those courts on a monthly basis, to go and inspect and to make sure that what we pay the contractors to do, one, that we get value for money, that we get a good standard. And so there will be consequences if we do not improve. And I think that is going to be the difference going into the next few months.
Certainly, the Department of Public Works doesn't have a great track record then when it comes to issues of... Why are you laughing? It doesn't have a great track record when it comes to issues of being able to pay people on time. But also, to date, I wanted to ask you, what is the update of recouping the monies that were used to help to pay the service providers in former President Jacob Zuma's project in Nkandla? Because for long the department has said we're recovering these monies, but I'm not sure where that project stands today.
Last month, I think around about the 25th, in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, it appeared there. We're in the process of recovering 155 million rand. The respondents asked for a postponement, and I think a date is being set for later this year. So it is already before the courts, the attempt by Public Works to recover that 155 million.
But do you have any confidence that your suppliers today are not doing what these suppliers had been accused of, which is exaggerating their prices, not delivering on things that they're charging for? I mean, what is the cleanup that you think you would have put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again in future?
Cathy, it's a general problem in government. If this glass costs 2 rand in a shop, when the same suppliers sell it to government, they want to sell it to us for 25 rand. Highly inflated prices. And so we're also making an appeal to our suppliers, you know, considering the economic situation that we are in, not to overcharge government. But also, there's also collusion with some of the officials in the department, that if something breaks and is reported on a Wednesday, it will then be left to a Friday so that the contractor go on site over a weekend and charge weekend rates. So there are a number of shenanigans going on in the system. And that's why we're going to have contract management now. And we're going to have term tenders so we don't have to go and procure for every little breakage that we have.
But as far as then some of these contracts may be concerned, do you know how many of those you may have inherited and what then the operation date for those will continue to be?
In a number of instances, we found that supply chain management procedures were not followed. We found that invoices were lost. We also found that some people are taking chances, submitting an invoice that's 10 years old or something like that. So it is starting a process which has started now last week, that will continue for the next 6 months. And I'll be able to come back to you after 6 months and say, or not before the end of the year, the year's gone by so quickly, and say what improvements that we've made, because we have to learn through our experience too. But Batupile principles, all of us must internalize, because it says put people first. So whatever we do, we should never just think about ourselves. We should be thinking about the public that experience these bad conditions on a daily basis.
Of course, then your department comes in to play a crucial role when you look at what this advisory panel on land has found, and especially the role of urban property development and spatial planning.
Yes.
So they've called for an audit, and this is now an audit of government, of all government properties, all state-owned land and land by SOEs.
Yes.
It's quite a lot of work to do. When you read the report, how do you begin to think about how you're going to be implementing some of its recommendations?
Well, I've seen the report and I've studied a copy of the report, and I think it's a job well done, because they're focusing land reform away from just agriculture, but also urban. And that is where we can play a role in the urban space, because that's where most of our buildings are. And also in towns and cities. I will be meeting with the advisory panel to say to them, help us and guide us to produce an implementation plan. President Ramaphosa has given us 2 months on which to come with an implementation plan of the advisory panel, and certainly before that time we will make the whole plan public. But all the land and all the buildings that we own can play a big role in land transformation.
How long would an audit like this take place, especially if you are to include the land that's owned by SOEs?
Well, I can only speak for Public Works. We've got an immovable asset register that's about 80% complete. I'm trying to bring in more ICT and technology. There is a bit of resistance to bring it in, but that's the way forward. I'm looking at various technologies whereby we can have all our buildings at the press of a button. You must be able to see where they are. And once this, or even before the asset register is completed, we must start releasing some of those buildings. First, for public good. Secondly, where we can release for commercial purposes, for farming purposes. We've also got agricultural land. So Cathy, I'm grateful that the President gave us this 2 months, because now we can take the report and all the recommendations. There are very good recommendations in this report of how we can bring social cohesion in our country rather than make land reform a divisive issue.
In all of this, where do the properties that we've seen government employees fall victim to, whether it's illness and even death, where do they play a role? And, you know, for the longest time, we still had officials at the health department at the Civitas building in Pretoria complaining about the upkeep of that particular building. To date, I don't know that anything has changed.
Yeah.
Last I checked on that situation, they were heading to court. And you still have a situation like that taking place. So how do you then ensure that no more lives are lost in these death traps of buildings that you now oversee?
Yes, certainly many of the buildings don't meet the health and safety standards. They don't have fire extinguishers in there, and also together with the health department we need to inspect these buildings more. But Cathy, until we agree on what to do, how to use that building, how to use that piece of land, we are not going to be able to utilize it to its optimal.
But what I'm asking you
so
is...
it is a coordinated effort of all government departments must come together, and every department must say, I need so many buildings of that land, and we release to them first, and then the rest of the buildings could be then put out either for disposal or for commercial use or for rental. But we have to do a spatial development framework for our country, a national one, so that we know that that piece of land is zoned for human settlement.
But for
then
the employee,
for
the employee who's going to work, Minister, in a dangerous building like the Civitas building in Pretoria, surely they don't want to hear about your framework, because every single day they're endangering their lives just doing their job.
It's unacceptable.
So what must they do?
It's unacceptable completely. It should not have happened in the first place. And that is where we need to prioritize. I have already said that we're in the second quarter of this financial year. If there are signs in some of the departments that they've not been able to spend their first quarter and their second quarter, that money will be moved away to emergencies like this, because we can no longer accept the excuse that there's no money.
So are you going to be personally taking care of it?
Yes, I am at the Helen Moffat, but I have got our CFO, our Director General. There are a team of competent people that are assisting me, and I want to thank them, you know, just the work that we've done over the past 3 days to inject more than 93 million rand into the economy of our country. But then you should also be saying, you should not be praising a fish because the fish can swim. It's work that we have to do in any case. It's now just have to maintain this program of making sure that we pay within 30 days.
So then for those officials, given the extent to which you acknowledge the crisis that some of these buildings are, and the state that some of these buildings are in, do you think that it's okay for those who stay at home and say, I would rather work from home than endanger my life by going into this building?
First of all, the duty is on the employer to provide a safe and healthy space. That is the duty of the employer. In this case, it is government, so the duty is upon us to do so. What I am saying is that as the Public Works Department responsible for the repairs and maintenance, we need to work together with the Health Department. They must also put some budget, but we can't use the excuse, you know, one life lost is one too many. And we need to bring some urgency into it and also engage with the unions, because the unions have been very outspoken about the conditions where their members must be working in. It's unacceptable. We can't allow it.
All right. Well, we'll be waiting then to see what the
Yes.
progress from conversations such as this will be. As you heard tomorrow, they'll be out and about in the country's courts with the Chief Justice, Mohlahlana. That will be priority. But we'll then also follow up to find out if there'll be any progress for those health workers. It's been 2 years now that those workers have been complaining about the state of that building. Many of them are now reverting to simply not going to work and working from home as a result of the disastrous state that that building is in. You're live on News at Prime. Mark Lewis is standing by. He'll have the day's sport with, of course, that heartbreaking news of Senzo Mayua's father, Sam Mayua's passing. Do stay with us for that.